We go. All right. The City of Sumner looks forward to welcoming members of the public to its meeting in person, but until further notice, we will continue to conduct meetings 100% virtually using the Zoom platform. The public is invited to attend using the Zoom meeting access on the website. So welcome to the January 10th, 2022 study session. I see all council members are present, and we will move on to regular business. So number one, operation facility update.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be starting that one. Let me just get my presentation going here.
Okay. There's our lights.
Mayor, we'll grab your lights for you here.
That's okay. I'm gonna bring in a lamp.
That's why Mayor Pugh always had a lamp on in his office.
Yeah.
All righty.
No, it's the lights. They'll come back on eventually.
Okay. Mayor, are you seeing my presentation or my?
Yes, I see it.
Thank you, Council. Tonight, we're going to be providing you an update on the operations facility and where we're at with this project. As a reminder, we're going to kind of start back in history, and we'll move forward to where we are today.
Jason, we see your presentation image, actually. There you go.
There you go.
Hey, we're back.
All right. So our current facility was built in the year 2000. And it is not large enough to accommodate our staff or some of our equity issues that we are facing. As an example of this, 3 pictures below. Starting on the left, this is our men's shower, which is acting currently as an overflow mudroom for drying out wet boots and equipment. The middle picture is our sign shop with doubles also as a break room, and that's partially because of COVID, but also because we just don't have enough space in our break room. Now on the right is our women's shower, which is also being used to hang clothing, but the rest of the restroom is equally full of boxes and supplies with just enough room for our one female employee to access the restroom. This is a photo taken pre-COVID. But this is just an example of their primary workroom, which also serves as their break room, their desk, their workspace. Kind of everything that they do is done around this table. And that's because the facility wasn't designed with separate work areas, office spaces, or lunchrooms. So the challenge is, obviously everybody has their one chair. They put all their normal food items, their smartphones, their laptops, everything is right there. There's not a space for them to store anything except on top of the desk. These are a couple of pictures of our a couple other areas. On the left is the mudroom. Obviously, you can see it's completely full with turnout gear and safety equipment. On the right is the one workstation that they do share. But you can also see there's a fridge in here. There's the vending machine. Off camera, there's actually the servers for the whole shops is located in this workspace. So why do we need a new facility? It's also important to think back to the year 2000. What did they build? Well, they built something that was primarily based on paper files, printed maps, and not really a whole lot of technology being used. Also think back to the late 90s, early 2000s, our population was about 8,500. We had almost no businesses in our manufacturing industrial center. Costco was just being built and a couple other warehouses, but not a whole lot up in that north half of the city. Also in our residential area, a lot of River Grove was still being built out A lot of East Sumner was still being built out. There was some areas off of Mead Macumber that were homes that were built, but a lot of the areas around the sports complex, for example, did not exist. So how does that compare to today? You know, everything is technology driven. Rather than using old methods, we have a SCADA system, which is always monitoring our water system and our sewer system. We use online job tracking systems, online payroll systems, email. Funny thing, we were building this thing, and I remember when I was implementing electronic timesheets back in 2015, that was the first time some of our field crews actually had email. Prior to 2015, they were not using email on a regular basis. I couldn't imagine how we do work today without our employees using email for job assignments, policy acknowledgements, just general correspondence. Training, and this started pre-COVID, but it's still definitely going on, and I'd say magnified incredibly, is the number of online trainings that we provide to our staff, and that this is trainings that they take from state organizations, higher education, like Green River provides a lot of our ongoing certification training. That is all provided virtually now. So them being able to find a place where they can do that training uninterrupted is very difficult in our current shops. A lot of times they'll sit in their trucks and do it because they can't find a spot in the building that doesn't have a lot of interruption going on. If you've been out there at any time, especially at the beginning of shift or at the end of shift, it's definitely playing Tetris with vehicles. Our fleet is much larger than when we built this facility. And not just when trucks, but when you think about the specialized equipment, things like multiple vac trucks. We have 3 vac trucks. We have a sweeper. We have a garbage truck. We have a spider excavator, multiple dump trucks, multiple backhoes. Much larger equipment than just your half-ton pickup trucks that they drive. And we have a lot of half-ton pickup trucks too. We also have some need for our larger vehicles and our more high dollar value vehicles to be parked indoors, not just from a security standpoint, but also from being able to respond after hours in an emergency. For example, a vac truck, you know, it has water on board of it. You can't leave it outside in an unheated environment, especially if you need to respond to some sort of after hours emergency. A lot of our service trucks, we have service trucks that are dedicated to water, sewer, and storm. High dollar value equipment on those vehicles, and leaving them out isn't always the best plan. We have battled ongoing theft at our shops, as well as a number of our city facilities. So if you've been to our shops, you know the trail runs along one side of it. We have a chain link fence as our primary means of security, and we've had a number of break-ins over the years. And it's never good when they, you know, vandalize a vehicle that you need after hours in an emergency. When we talk about not being large enough to accommodate staff, we actually have staff in multiple facilities across the community. Some of that is due to COVID. For example, we have some of our staff just to provide extra distancing, working out of buildings that we have acquired for our restoration project, actually for the operations facility. But we also have a group of staff that is permanently not located with the shops, which creates some operational difficulties. So one of that is the parks department. They're actually located at the old golf course. They're in the south end of the golf course in the old well house, as well as shop. They're separated by about 75 yards between those two buildings. They continually have issues with floods. So anytime the water gets high, and that not necessarily the river, sometimes it's just rainwater, it can cause the well house to flood. Ongoing issues with theft, vandalism, as well as vermin. What's interesting about these two buildings is as we do the White River Restoration Project, they will be torn down. And while that's a little ways in the future, a year or so, We are going to be starting on the 24th Street utility relocation, which is going to severely limit the access to these buildings from the south. And then our facilities department, they're located, they have a workspace here in City Hall, but their offsite storage and workshop is actually the old SDA office. And there's definitely not enough storage for the equipment or the maintenance needs. And that may be torn down as part of the Heritage Park redesign as part of the Main Street Vision project. A couple photos just to illustrate the current parks situation. This is the well house on the top that they work out of. You can see the lockers for changing or with the old well pumps. There's no privacy. This door in the back is, you can see it in the background there, is to the outside. Their break room, lunchroom, workspace is just a table in an old garage bay, and they hang up their wet equipment in the garage to dry. About 75 yards away is the old shop building. This is a pole barn with a gravel floor. This is where they park all their equipment, including the garbage truck. The community float is stored up there as well. And this is actually where their bathroom is. Their bathroom is a honey bucket. They have no running water in this shop building. So any sanitation for after they use the restroom, they have to go back down 75 yards away to the well house to access water.
And they are either bad aim or it's leaking.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they may have pumped it that day. The offices, this is just actually last week because we were anticipating flooding. Like I said, this building, the old well house, does get water in it when the water gets high. So it's whenever they think that's a possibility, they do have to move everything up off the floor and either move it up to the shop building, like they did with their fridge, their refrigerator that had to be moved up there because they had nowhere to put it. And then obviously all their chairs and stuff you can see end up on top of their desks. So in summary, we have grown a lot since 2000, and expanding our parks and trails in the future also means more equipment and staff. So obviously where they're at today is not ideal, and they would benefit from the new operations center being co-located with the rest of the shop's employees. They do share some equipment, and also they deserve a running water bathroom, for example. They shouldn't have to be using a honey bucket on a daily basis. Also, our current facility is not set up for the changing environmental needs. We know electric vehicles are on the horizon. There's some state laws that are already in place, and they are being expanded upon that will require cities to electrify their fleets in the coming years. I'm going to turn it over to Doug, who's going to go over the next few slides on what we've done so far.
Thanks, Jason. Good evening, Mayor, Council. So part of this process is that we went, and anytime you do a facility like this, you go through a needs analysis. And you look at current staffing, how many vehicles you have, what's the current office space, equipment, storage needs, and how the operation works. And then through that exercise, it looks at those needs analysis, not only for current, but for future. It looks at what size property you need. And so the city went through quite a few areas within the city limits to try to find a place. And we actually assessed 6 different locations before we were able to locate on the properties on 29th Street. But that's a very involved process. It involves existing staff, shop staff out there, administration staff, giving the vision and the focus of what we want to accomplish out there, but also gives the people that are out in the shops a way to communicate with, in this case, a consultant to provide to them how they run their operations. Next slide, please. So we decided, started the design in July of 2020. And we started laying out the properties that we had, and our consultant came up with a conceptual drawing that we went through design charrettes with the existing staff and kind of showed them what we were thinking. And they started looking at, how rigs were coming in and out, how their operation would work for different sections of the city, whether it was storm, water, sewer, or maintenance facility, looking at the design that our architect came up with. So, and then in September of 2020, we started questioning if the site was big enough for the long term. And that's when we started looking into the properties on the north side of 29th Street. And by looking at that, gave us even a little bit more room to figure out the flow of the shop's personnel and how things were spaced on the drawing, so that we could see that we were basically bursting at the seams. And when we originally bought the properties that we had on the south side of 29th Street, we thought we had enough room. And through going through this exercise, we realized that we probably did not have enough room. So, we started looking at how we also wanted to be good neighbors to not only the industrial area, but also to the residential area out there, and worked really hard to make sure that we were trying to accommodate both people out there, and mainly providing an aesthetic feel to the neighborhood out there on the east side of our project that was appealing to everyone. And through some meetings that we had, the open houses that we had, we got some positive feedback from that group that they thought that what we were presenting was a good look for the area out there. And that outreach was done through a number of different ways. We put it on our Sumner Connects, and we had 447 visitors to that site, and we also had 46 informed visitors that actually are engaging with city staff, and then we had 10 neighbors that actually came out on site when we had our open house out on site. But we also done some printings in the e-newsletter. We were on social media, and we did a couple virtual open houses that were just through a venue like this. And then we actually had an on-site one in the fall of 2021. Slide, please. Jason, you're muted.
Thanks, Doug. One of the issues that Doug just mentioned is, early on in the process, we realized that we did not have enough space. And we met with the mayor at the time, and we said, okay, well, what do we do here? What are our alternatives? So we had a brainstorming session with staff and the mayor, and we came up with a few ways that we could move this project forward. And, these are the top three. Obviously, I think there were a lot of brainstorming going on, but we focused in on, well, what if we retained the existing facility instead of buying the parcels on the north side of 29th? What would that look like? What if we didn't buy the parcels on 29th and we didn't keep the existing shops? What if we just delayed the decamp facility and maybe use some of our White River Restoration project property in the future for that? And lastly, how do we value engineer the plans to get them the most affordable lead plans we could? So we're going to go over these at a fairly high level today, but just to kind of show you what staff analyzed over the last year. So the first is maintaining the existing shops facility. And we looked at this in two ways. One, we could split it into two parcels, and that would allow us to locate the dry storage and the decamp facility on the south, and then sell the north half. And we worked with our consultant and mocked it up and figured out what that would take. And what it ultimately did is it would require us to demo the buildings on the property and rebuild them with that, so they're higher, taller access, as well as relocate some of them to allow for some turning movements. The challenges were though that it still provided some very limited and rather unsafe turning movements on just maintaining that south parcel. Also, everything, all the utilities that are at the existing shops are on the north parcel, which means we'd have to bring in utilities if we were to just maintain one half of the property. So then that quickly led us to, well, now we got to retain the whole thing. What would that look like? So if we retain the whole thing, we could put the decant and the dry storage on the south still, but you still have the turning movement issues. And you could retain a couple of the buildings on the north and possibly locate the parks and facility crews there, and then look at downsizing the new facility a little bit. And what we came up with our consultants was, yeah, it's doable. You still have the challenges on the south end with the turning movements, and you have to put some considerable rework and demo into the whole site to make it work. And then we looked at the numbers. So there's a lot of numbers on this, but I'll kind of walk through the top portion first. So if we were to improve the existing shops, and that's basically keeping the whole thing, adding a decant, adding the dry storage, reworking the buildings, demoing the ones we need, that'd be about $1.9 million. To develop the 29th Street properties, the two parcels on the north side of 29th Street, you're looking at a little over $1 million of property acquisition and about $3.5 million in improvement costs. So right there, you can see that 29th Street at that level is costing more than improving the existing shops. But really, the value in the existing shops is in the land. So we went out, we got a market opinion from Kidder Matthews, and they said conservatively, today's dollars, it's worth about $4.1 million. So if you were to sell the existing shops at $4.1 million, you actually make it so it's cheaper. You apply that to the overall project, that lowers your development costs on the 29th Street properties down to $455,000. So really, it's saving about just about $1.5 million to build on 29th Street. In addition, you recognize the operational efficiency of having everybody co-located in one area. Doug's going to talk about the other two options next. So I'll turn it back over to him.
Okay, thanks. We looked at doing a temporary decamp facility on 16th Street properties that we currently own. And this is a temporary solution because eventually we're going to build a flood wall along the north side of 16th Street to protect ourselves from the flooding issues that we're having on the White River. And the other thing is that some of the funds that we purchase these properties with will not allow that kind of use with those properties. So we're only down to one, maybe two properties that we could potentially use for small amount of time, I would say less than 5 to 6 years. So the savings may not be realized, but there's a lot of other issues here with using these properties and as a decamp facility. So it just didn't work into our favor to try to improve an area that eventually we were going to have to tear down and remove everything that we decanted from there. So next slide, please.
Doug, before I move on to the next slide, I think probably we should go over what does decant mean and where are we currently decanting?
Sure. There's two types of decant. One is with material that comes out of the ground when we're doing storm fixes and or street repairs. That's one type of decanting. The other type of decanting is when the soil is contaminated with either sewage breakage or water that is maybe mixed with gasoline or something like that. That is a different type of decanting, and we're doing one of those currently at the good dirt is going to the existing wastewater treatment plant. And the other one is we are decanting out on the restoration site project. And if it's extremely high volumes of bad concentrate, we actually take that to the LRI facility in Puyallup for their decant.
Thanks, Doug.
Jason, can we ask for questions before we get too far on maybe what we've gone through already? Maybe?
Sure. Yeah, this is the last slide and then it'd probably be a good break.
Okay, all right, great. Go ahead, Jason.
Go ahead, Doug.
Okay,
Or
so we looked at value engineering the facility, and part of that was, we already recognized that this was a very lean project already. These are manufactured pre-engineered buildings, which are more of the inexpensive ways of building this. We also looked at removing covered parking, which was problematic because of our vehicles and our material being out in the rain and the impacts that has. We also looked at removing the CMU wall, this concrete masonry unit wall, and putting in chain link fence, which aesthetically doesn't look good and it doesn't provide the safety that we were trying to accomplish. And that CMU wall also runs along the easterly side of the property, separating us from the neighborhood on the east side. There's still some opportunities as we finish designing this, but they're not bringing in big dollars for us for savings.
Okay.
You're happy to break for questions.
Yeah. Barbara?
So the first, the present shops was built in 2000. How are you going to plan for the next 25 years? Because we don't want to come back, well, I'll be gone, but don't want to come back and have a request for a new shops in 25 years.
That's a great question. And that went right back into the very beginning when we were doing the needs analysis. And this building that is proposed is a 50-year building, but the site, because of the way it's being designed, will allow us to add on a little bit to some of the buildings, which could get us around 75 years. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to need to put money into this building, because obviously technology is going to change, things wear out, but it's truly being designed for the future and can accommodate a lot more staff than what we have today. Doug has those numbers.
Yeah, well, it'd be good if they had nice facilities, like a running water and the nice toilets.
Any more questions? Councilmember Newman?
Yeah, I'm wondering what the status is of working on purchasing the properties to the north, I believe.
That's coming up in our presentation in just a few minutes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Mr. Wilson, head on.
So I'm going to turn it over to Cassandra, who's going to go through the financing options. And I'll say as she's getting going here, at the end of this, you'll have a staff recommendation on how to proceed. But she's going to go over the cost and the annual debt service. So Cassandra. Cassandra, we can't hear you. Still no.
How about now?
There you are.
There we
All
go.
right. My apologies. So I was saying that really lockstep in with the design of this facility has been the question of the most efficient way to finance it. This is a large acquisition. And so we've always known that this would be a debt issue. And we've been looking at the specifics of that as we've moved along with design. One of the first things we really need to determine was how much of this is governmental or general fund, and how much of this is utility funds. Those are two separate types of debt issuance. One is by revenue debt. The other one is general obligation debt, which is the general fund portion. In order to really get a good, solid proportion of general versus utility, we looked at not only position budgeting, so we looked at the FTEs and the salary costs that were split between all of our different funds, but we also looked at the vehicle distribution in those funds. And of course, with the general fund, not only do we have streets, but we also have vehicle counts for police, parks, facilities, developmental services, and CD. As we completed those calculations, this really did turn out to be almost an even split between the general fund and the utility funds. And so we ran our debt service. We are looking at a $50 million issue in order to cover costs of the facility as well as issuance costs. Ideally, in the general fund, we would keep our debt service around $750,000 annually. But looking at how this is preliminary splitting out, based on the term, we have anywhere between 1.2 million in the general fund annually and 1.57 in the general fund annually. That's not including the $10 million of golf course sale proceeds that have been earmarked for this project by council resolution. Because the timing of that is still not determined, that hasn't been worked into the calculations. Our hope would be that the timing of that would help offset the debt service. In addition, of course, any debt that we issue will have a clause that will give us the ability to early retire based on closing of the sale and seeing those proceeds. And there are also proceeds that are not earmarked within the golf course sale that will be at council discretion to allocate when that happens. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Cassandra? Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, Cassandra, when I was reading through these slides earlier, I wondered about, and this may not be a real popular thing to talk about, but putting this to the vote of the people for our bond issue. Can you discuss the pros and cons of that versus this alternative, please?
Sure. So a voted bond issue, like I said, it would go out to the voters. We would be looking for a 60% approval rate. With the benefit of a voted bond is the voters are approving a special property tax. It's an excess levy. So the voters would be saying, we're willing to increase our property tax specifically to cover this debt service for a certain period of time. The benefit, of course, is you are funding it via a new revenue option, that excess property tax levy, versus using existing resources.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Cassandra?
Mayor, Councilmember Cole has her hand up.
Oh, Councilmember Cole.
Yes, I actually don't understand why it's a $50 million issue when it says that it's like a $4.6 million project. So can you help me understand that?
Of course. So the 4.6, that's for the North Properties development. So this will be looking at the overall property cost. So, and I will defer to Doug on the most recent estimate for construction. I believe we were at 42 million.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then additional cost for debt issuance. So whenever we issue a debt of this magnitude, we would also be retaining a financial advisor as well as bond counsel and a placement agent, as well as incurring cost for rating. We would be rated by one of the national rating agencies, either S&P or Moody's, to essentially assign the credit worthiness. And all of that comes at a cost.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilmember Reed.
Mayor, if I could just add one more thing.
Oh, sure.
Just, we did round up because we have so much volatility right now in the construction market and supply chain. And also based on the staff recommendation, you'll see here in a moment, we're going to be asking you to probably push this project out a little bit. So we know costs are not going to go down likely. So we're trying to kind of give you the full picture of what it could be and hope that it comes in a little less.
Okay. Now, Councilmember Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So Cassandra, question with the bond obligations that you have listed here as options. What is the on the ground impact of those to either fees, services, or taxes as they sit without going to a vote?
So as they sit now, like I said, we would be most comfortable with a $750,000 annual debt service in the general fund. So to make up that difference, council would have some discretion as far as potentially services, potential use of some refunds on a short-term basis that's not a recurring, potential use of having to increase other revenue streams such as permitting fees, looking at the council, the amount that's annually marked as a council reserve. You know, there's a variety of options, but they would all have some sort of a service offset. And that would be a policy decision at the council level.
Okay, thank you. That's what I'm trying to understand is how are we planning to pay for it currently without, if we did not go to a public vote? Because I'll be honest, I don't think that's a very viable measure. I think in different times it probably would be, but right now with all of the recent events of the last few years, going back and asking for more taxes, I think we saw it with the bonds for fire. Even the fire department didn't get theirs. I think ours would be just as unlikely at this point, unless something changes dramatically here soon. So although I like the idea of the public having input, I don't know that would be putting too much weight on that. I think is risky. Unless we do some polling or some type of, I don't know if there's some preliminary work to get an idea on that. And the 1.5 that you've got listed, or I should say 1.2 you've got listed here, that is not including the 10 million from the Gulf sale, correct? Or is that after, or is that assuming that that's going to come in?
This is not including that 10 million. These were factors just based on a straight $50 million issue. Again, with the goal that as those proceeds are recognized, they could be used to relieve some of that debt obligation.
Okay.
And we certainly share the same concerns about how this would be handled with the general fund if this were to go out, next month as is. And I think that's what you'll see a little bit later in the conversation with the council ask.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
For reference, if that 10 million was to come in and we put it towards it, it represents about 40% of the general fund obligation for this project.
Which sounds like it puts it into the manageable category without having to go back to increasing, because I'll be honest, increasing fees, especially permit fees, when we're looking at ways currently to reduce the ability for people to get permits and fees. I don't like the idea of reducing one and replacing it with something else. And then, and I think taxes are a big issue. So that's a lot to digest.
It certainly is, and that's you'll see that in our next few slides here. But you're absolutely right. Let's be honest, the interest rates are also going to change between now and whenever this debt is issued. So there's a lot of variables at play right now with this whole project.
All right.
So that brings us to the 29th Street North parcels.
I think Councilmember Brown had a question, Jason.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, can we go back? Yeah. Sandra, So how do we pay for the utility bonds? Do we raise rates?
That would be worked into the rate model and may have an impact on the rates, yes.
All right, thanks.
All right, any other questions before we move on here? All right, Mr. Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So that brings us to the 29th Street North parcels. As you may recall, earlier, it was actually first meeting in December, we were before you to talk about the design contract for those north parcels, as well as some authorization to move towards condemnation on at least one of those two parcels. So tonight, I'm pleased to tell you that we continue to work at negotiating an agreed sale price for those, but we are not yet at a resolution or not an agreement. So tonight, Andrea will be going over what does it mean to condemn a property, what's our legal authority, and what's the remedy for the property owner. So I'll turn it over to Andrea.
Thank you. And I'll keep it brief tonight because like Jason said, about 6 weeks ago, I was before you and I went into some depth on the condemnation process, but in an effort to summarize what I said in that prior meeting and then provide additional information, I'm back before you. So condemnation is a constitutional right that cities have to acquire private property for a public project. It requires that the city then pay just compensation. And what just compensation really means, according to the case law, is fair market value. Fair market value is determined based on a very thorough appraisal and review appraisal process. So the work is double and triple checked. And the city works with a right-of-way acquisition agent, a consultant that actually assists property owners through the acquisition process, makes sure that they're fully informed as to all of their benefits that they're entitled to for being displaced, which includes payment for the acquired property. And as I will talk about on the next slide, a number of relocation benefits, depending on the type of owner that they are. If they are a resident of the home, they are entitled to some benefits versus if they are let's say an out-of-state owner that has a tenant in the home. So condemnation is a very intimidating term. It can be a stressful process to have a government entity approach and discuss acquiring property, but the law has been developed such that it really does help people end up whole, if not better off, which I'll explain. So if we could go on to the next slide. So relocation benefits, like I said, differ depending on the type of owner. For one of the parcels on the north side of 29th Street, the owner leases out the property. And so that owner is entitled to different relocation benefits than if he resided on the property. For example, a resident owner is entitled to the fair market value for the acquisition and all of their moving expenses paid in full. The right-of-way acquisition agent helps the property owner locate replacement properties, helps hire the moving companies, really assists the property owner along in that process. The next step down is an owner who leases out their property. They're entitled to the same benefits that I just discussed. In addition, they are entitled to up to $50,000 in what's called reestablishment benefits. That money is intended to help them acquire a new rental property and outfit it so that it is a similarly situated rental property that they can lease and gain income from. So reestablishment entitlement benefits. And I put an asterisk here because it's important that the property owner be paying taxes on that rental income in order to entitle them to that benefit. And then for tenants that are displaced from their home that they're either renting or that they have some other agreement with the property owner to live in, Their moving expenses are paid in full. The right-of-way acquisition agent, the consultant, helps locate replacement properties for them. And if there's a difference between the rent that they pay today and the rent that they would be charged at the replacement property, they are entitled to 42 months of that difference in a lump sum. And that lump sum, we've been told by our consultant, is often used by displaced tenants as a down payment to acquire their own property, to actually buy a home. So what the market is actually seeing is that displaced tenants are often finding themselves as homeowners through this process. So it's not always a pleasant process. I don't want to look at it with rose-colored glasses, but the law is favorable to displaced property owners and make sure that they really are made whole, both through the payment of just compensation and through all of the relocation benefits that they're entitled to.
Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. Andrea, I have a question on the difference between rent paid and the lump sum for 42 months. I'm assuming that's based on verified rental records under the taxable portion that you mentioned before. So they would have had to been reporting that and paying taxes on it?
So this is for the amount of rent that tenants pay. So it typically would be based on providing a copy of the lease agreement. But for some tenants who are not responsive or who don't have a formal lease agreement, it's based on market rates. It's based really on what the general region or other rental properties in the location are charging on a median basis. And then they will get the differential in a 42-month lump sum.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So Councilmember Botetto had her hand up, and then we'll call on Councilmember Cole after. Go ahead, Barbara.
On the resident owner, it says moving expenses paid in full. Is there any geographic limitations? Could they go to New York or, what is
Hey, vacation.
yeah.
Generally speaking, we're talking about local moves. We're talking about really replacement properties that are in the same geographic location. There are income tax implications that I won't get into today. I'm not a tax professional. I know enough to be dangerous. But generally speaking, the money that is acquired through a condemnation must be used to purchase a replacement property, or it's subject to income tax. So most often, condemned property owners are finding a replacement property and putting that money back into a replacement site that is fairly close in proximity to the property that they had condemned. And then the moving expenses are paid for that. Now, there have been some acquisitions that have been extremely expensive moves, in particular for industrial type businesses, right? They have large machinery and it's really difficult to find a relocation site and a replacement property. And so the moves end up being almost as expensive as the acquisition. And that is paid for completely through this process.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Councilmember Cole.
Yes, so I'm wondering if for the displaced tenants, the relocation assistance, is it for everyone, or is there some income eligibility requirement?
There is no income eligibility. Anybody that can prove that they're a tenant, generally speaking, we have to have some type of proof, a lease agreement, some verbal authorization from the landlord. Not everybody can just say, I've been here one night and so I'm entitled to relocation benefits. There's a duration period, typically 90 days. They have to demonstrate that they've been living there and they're being displaced. So there are eligibility requirements, but very few of them are dependent on income.
Okay, Councilmember Reed, you still have your hand up. Are you?
I'm good, thank you.
You're good.
Councilmember
right.
Cole, let me caveat off of what I just said.
Mhm.
Replacement sites must be equivalent to the unit that the tenant is displaced from. So for example, The right-of-way acquisition agent, the consultant that the city works with to acquire properties, would never suggest a relocation site that leaves a tenant worse off. So if that's what you mean in terms of income eligibility for certain types of housing, tenants won't be asked to take a step down. They can voluntarily do so if they want to locate their own relocation site. But the options that will be provided to displaced tenants are similar, like kind properties.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. Andrea, maybe this was discussed last year when you were talking about this to the other council members. Are we, is it for sure that we're having to go to condemnation, or are we still trying to negotiate for the property? Or what's your take on which is best for the city?
Really, really good question. There are two parcels north of 29th Street. One, for all intents and purposes, is a willing seller. We believe that the communications thus far indicate that it will be an arm's length transaction and that he will willingly sell his property to the city. The other property owner has been far less responsive, virtually unresponsive. And that generally indicates an unwillingness to participate in an arm's length transaction, right? I don't need to tell any of you what the city's impression is, and which is why we're before you to discuss condemnation and have council preemptively authorize condemnation in the off chance that we need to use it. At this point in time, we're still attempting to negotiate. We're attempting to contact them by every means possible and provide relocation explanations of all the benefits. So by no means are we stopping our attempt to engage in a very cordial arm's length transaction. But if condemnation becomes necessary, it is absolutely in the city's best interest. It exists so that public projects aren't halted. And so I think it's a very important tool in the toolbox, and one that council should seriously consider on this project to at least authorize if we need it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Okay.
Mayor, if I could just add in, one thing we've heard, like, well, we don't condemn properties. And I just want to say we have condemned properties in the past. We've done it for projects like 136 of Valentine. We had to condemn properties to get the right of way we need to expand the road. But we've also done it with some of our best partners, like the old cannery. We've had to condemn property on them as part of the Cannery Way Bridge construction project. And really that just gave us the time to reach an amicable solution between both parties. Andrea spoke about this last time too. There are some agencies, and we are not one of them, but some government entities, when they go to their elected officials to seek approval to purchase property, they automatically get the approval to condemn. We're not that way. We always try to reach a resolution, and I think we're going to always want to do that because that just feels right. It's the right thing to do. But how this process works varies from city to city, government entity to government entity. So that goes into the ask for tonight is input on the north parcels. Is council comfortable with us continuing to move forward on trying to acquire the north parcels and continue with the design efforts? Staff's recommendations are that we do continue to move forward with negotiating, but know that we might be back at some point asking for condemnation authority. And there's some need probably sooner than later on that if we want to continue with the north parcels. And then move forward with approving the north parcel design contract that's on hold. The second one is, what do we do with this project? As you know, we have a funding gap right now. A lot of it is tied to the sale of the golf course and when those revenues will be coming in. And staff's recommendation is that we delay this 1 year, possibly even 2 years. That'll help us better understand the golf course sale timing. And then if council chooses to allocate that 10 million or possibly even some additional funds from the golf course sale proceed, it allows us to mitigate the impacts to the general fund debt service payment. Our hope is that costs will stabilize and not go out of control over the next couple of years. But the construction market is extremely volatile right now. We are also not sure what the impact of the infrastructure dollars coming from the federal government will be on these type of contractors. There's a lot of projects that are going to be built, and what is that going to do to the cost of construction? And then lastly, delaying does mean that we're going to probably have to find an interim solution for our parks office and equipment. As I mentioned before, as we do the early phases of the restoration project, including the 24th Street Utility Relocation Project, it's going to make it extremely difficult to access those locations. And then, every time we near a flood, just like we were last week, we're running into potential challenges with those, that one well house building. So staff's recommendation, like I said, delay 1 year, maybe 2, and then as staff will come back with you with some solutions for temporary or possibly long-term parks, office, and equipment storage.
Councilmember Newman, do you have a question?
I do, thanks. I wonder what happens to the project if the north property for some reason is like, if we aren't able to acquire it.
If we're not able to acquire it, well, we can acquire it through the condemnation process. It might just take some time, right? But if council chose not to move forward with the 29th Street parcels, then we would be back to really putting all that money back into the existing facility to rework it, demo some buildings, and it's less than ideal and more expensive.
Thank you.
All right, so we have 2 staff recommendations here. Do we have any input on that? Councilmember Reed?
So I have a question. So the golf course sale has about two and a half years left on its clock. Wasn't it a 3-year to final?
Yeah, council in the fall approved a 3-year extension.
And then that's supposed to be a final, that at the end of the 3 years, it closes regardless. Is that correct?
Not exactly. I'll let Andrea step in and
And I won't spend a lot of time on this since it's not on the agenda, but the terms are not, it closes immediately at the end of the 3-year period or nothing. It is intended to get us through a core permit, and we expect that we'll be able to close before that 3-year period is up. That's the best I can say today.
Okay. And then, and I'm all for proceeding forward with the design and options, but at the same time seeking every alternate funding possibility, whether it be state and federal grants or several other things that don't have a ratepayer or tax impact, or at least a minimal one, or a minimal one that we would need to go to voters for.
What about the north parcels, Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, no, I'm in favor of continuing with the discussions. That was my understanding, is that we are we asking for a start the condemnation process now, or are we asking for continue the discussions and then?
as I mentioned, we've been continuing the discussions, as Andrea mentioned. No response is a response at this point. So, at some point, and probably in the not too distant future, we will be coming to you asking for condemnation authority to start that process. We'll continue to negotiate even after you condemn, even if you approve that ordinance, that doesn't stop everything. That just actually makes it move forward because they have to move forward at that point.
Jason just hit the nail on the head. Oftentimes we gain more traction and we end up having very fruitful discussions and negotiations after condemnation is on the table. One of the reasons is there are tax benefits to being, quote, under threat of condemnation for property owners. But often it's the start of very good discussions when before condemnation authority was, or before condemnation was approved, you don't get very far.
It encourages them to come to the table.
Correct.
So, they've been unresponsive. So we haven't actually received a no from them. They're just not engaging.
That's accurate.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. I had a question first. Can you refresh my memory on where were the golf course funds to be put? What were we going to do with that money?
The golf course is a general fund asset. So any sale proceeds realized belong to the general fund. About a year and a half ago, council passed 2 resolutions of intent for those funds to help leverage grant funds. 10 million of the, going back, the sale price is approximately 44 million. Of that, 10 million was earmarked for the operations facility and 20 million was earmarked for the White River Restoration Project, leaving about 14 million unearmarked. And just as a reminder, it's all up to final council decision on where those funds actually get spent. And Cassandra is probably jumping up and down right now. We don't do anything until we actually realize those funds. So until that golf course sells and we have that money in the general fund, we don't count on it.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I was not present when that was decided, so I appreciate knowing that. I'm in favor of authorizing condemnation and moving forward with the design contract, which is for the north parcel's consideration. And I'm just appalled at the condition that the workers have to deal with on a daily basis. And I feel it would be a disservice to our employees to delay it at all. I think we should move forward in due haste. Thank you.
Councilmember Hochstetter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, my question is, do we have any possible areas to put a interim solution for the parks office and the equipment storage for that part of our employees?
So there's a few things that we've looked at. We've looked at leasing them some space in a small warehouse. They need about 5,000 square feet, so it's not exactly a small space. We've also looked at possibly relocating the existing shops building. Not when I say shops, the golf course shops where they're storing the honey bucket and all that. Can we dismantle that and maybe move that to some property at the cemetery? What we haven't talked about tonight at all is the cemetery building is failing itself in very similar condition, and that's not even contemplated with this project. So maybe there's an opportunity rather than renting a warehouse space to use that same dollar amount to come up with a solution that the Parks Department could be in temporarily and then eventually move the cemetery into. We're still very early in exploring those, but that's kind of our early thoughts.
Okay, thank you for that. I too would like to see our employees have healthy working conditions. I'm not against us renting if that's what it takes. I don't think we should drag their situation out a whole lot longer, but because even to build a new building at the cemetery and expand it out, you're probably talking years, aren't you?
It definitely could be several months, and it's a cost analysis too. So when we look at rental of a space that large, you're talking anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 a month likely, and you do that for 3 years. It's a good chunk of money. So it's trying to figure out the best short term but possibly long term financial solution.
Okay. Boy, those are big costs, aren't they? Well, I'm in favor of authorizing the condemnation so we can move forward on that and get that part of, we need to know where we are on that location as a whole. So I would like to see us do that. I am disappointed we have to delay everything, but I understand with so many unknowns, you feel it's best. So, but I do want you to push forward on finding a solution for the employees. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Botetto.
Yeah. I recall that when you had the open houses, that one of the property owners, it sounds like they're agreeable to sell. And then there was the second property where there were a number of tenants and the neighbors were hoping that is that the same property where you haven't heard back from the owner?
Yes, initially they were responsive, and they
Okay.
live out of state. The owners live out of state, and they were responsive initially, and those communications have dropped off. So I would say as of late, we have not received a response, but I can't say that we never have received a response. We know that our communications are getting to them.
Okay, so I would approve moving forward with condemnation, because if it sounds like then they know what the parameters are. So I would approve that. And, just like everybody else has said, I think the employees deserve good working conditions. So I'd like to see that.
Thank you. Councilmember Cole.
I wanted to just echo my shock at the conditions of the operations facility. And I think that we should not delay, this project should not be delayed at all because of that. And it made me wonder if, have there been any employee complaints because of the conditions of the operations facility?
Have there been formal complaints? No.
Formal, yes, no.
Have there been a lot of comments? Yes. And honestly, I'm quite surprised at our park staff. They are very resilient, and not many employee groups would find that acceptable.
Yes, I can imagine. And even just, no restroom, no running water. To me, that's just really unacceptable. And it'd be extremely challenging to work in that kind of environment for me. Thank you.
Councilmember Cole, do you have any input on the north parcels?
Oh, I would most likely vote, be in favor of authorizing condemnation.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, I'm in favor of all of the staff's recommendations.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Oh, we have another one. Councilmember Cole, do you have another? Or is it just your hand?
Sorry, no, I forgot to remove my hand.
Okay. Thank you. There you go, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. So we will be bringing back the North Parcel design contract for approval on February 7th. And either that day or shortly thereafter, you're likely to see an ordinance authorizing the condemnation of the North Parcel. And like I said, we'll continue to negotiate in good faith, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to reach a resolution on that. Really appreciate your input tonight, and I will say it was difficult to send staff an email this morning, our field crews, and let them know that I was making this recommendation tonight to delay, because this is something that they are excited about, and know that they will be pleased to hear that you all recognize their current working conditions and value them and want to see improvement. So thank you for those kind words tonight.
Okay. So we're going to move on, I think, to Council Code of Conduct.
All right.
City Administrator Jason Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just switching some programs around here. At last week's regular council meeting, council asked to delay consideration of the principles of conduct and asked that they be brought to a study session for further discussion. I want to go back and remind council that these were originally adopted in 2010, and they were meant to supplement the official council rules and to serve really as a code of conduct and behavior norms document for council to review every 2 years and approve and acknowledge that you all agreed to follow these behavioral norms. This is really a council document. It is at your pleasure that this document exists and how it is prepared and what it says. For ease of discussion for tonight, I did take that code of conduct and I went through and I said, what things are in this principles of conduct that are already in our existing rules? And in your packet, you'll see in red next to each principles of conduct, if there was a applicable rule or similar rule that you have already adopted, I put that number in red. Also in your packet is a full copy of the current council rules, which is resolution 1575. When there wasn't a corresponding rule, I highlighted it in yellow and I made a staff recommendation in blue below it. Not everything has a staff recommendation because really it's going to be up to council on some of these, well, on all of them, but some of them I had no official recommendation on. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. So I'll share my screen, I'll pull up that document and I'll turn it over to council for discussion.
Okay. So the first is number 2, I imagine. Do we have any input on rule number 2?
Mayor, if I could suggest, maybe to start this off, we should ask, what does council want to do with this document? Do you want to keep it? Do you want to amend it? Do you want to get rid of it?
Just this one, just number 2, or this whole?
I would start with the whole principles of conduct in general, and then if
Right.
council wants to amend it or keep it, or make edits to it, then that might help further the discussion.
Okay, so let's go with, do you want to keep the conduct rules here? Councilmember Hochstetter, I'll just start at the top.
I'm in favor of eliminating the principles of conduct and following your suggestion to incorporate a few of the important things into the rules. So that's the way I looked at and approached, and when I read this, that's the mindset that I used on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Botetto.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's necessary to have something to follow since, you know, when you're going from being a private citizen to an elected official, it's just very good to have all these guidelines. So I'm in favor.
All right. Councilmember Newman.
Part of like in asking ourselves, I think this question about what if they're necessary or not is like, how are they enforced? Like, I'm also kind of not a fan of having rules that you can't enforce. And if we already have we have a document that goes over like the technical issues that most council and organizations might want to or should address. A lot of this just seems extra and a little bit of us trying to babysit one another or like sort of nanny or make sure they can't do too much. And maybe it takes away some of the autonomy. We can go through, like, if we want to keep it, then we can go through those specific issues. But the whole thing seems kind of unnecessary to me, as long as we already have, the other document that has like more technical issues in there. But on a lighter note, I have a question about number 6, to not pass food or eat at the dais. So Zoom, I had my camera off because I was eating a carrot. And no, people didn't have to watch me do that. But does Zoom count as the dais in that one?
I think so. Huh.
So I've already violated these.
Okay. Do we have any other input on
Mayor, I
this?
can answer Councilmember Newman's question about enforcing the rules.
Mhm.
So if it's in the principles of conduct and it's covered in the council rules themselves, like a number of these are, then the council rules would dictate how it's enforced. And it's done through a censure. That could be a removal of committee or removal of position. Those are outlined in the official rules. In the cases of the highlighted things in yellow that are not in the council rules, your guess is as good as mine of how we'd enforce that, because it doesn't say in this document.
Thanks. I'm gonna finish the rest of my carrot.
We don't have any council police. We need some. Any other input? Councilmember Botetto.
Well, I think I was done, but I do have a question about, when we have hybrid meetings where you have the option of being both in person or Zooming in, do you need to notify like the clerk maybe 24 hours in advance, or what are some of the guidelines for that?
So those are adopted in the latest version of the council rules. And you do not need to notify, that was a change. You used to have to notify the clerk if you were going to attend virtually. Now, Rule 13.5, it says you have the option to attend any meeting virtually when necessary, if the alternative to attending virtually would mean the council member would be otherwise absent from the meeting. So when council originally discussed adding that to the rules about a year ago, it was really with the emphasis of council members at the time felt that you should be attending in person unless you were unable to attend because you're out of state or whatever, and you're attending virtually is the only option.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. I'm all for simplification, and I feel like having two different documents that sometimes a little bit compete with each other makes for more confusion. I'm all in favor of just having one and maybe just doing away with the principles of conduct and going with the other thing, whatever it's called, the resolution.
Okay. Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. I do kind of like what Councilmember Stewart just mentioned about consolidating and having one reference point. And anything that would need to be adopted from this into rules under the resolution makes total sense. And again, also with what Councilmember Newman mentioned about the enforcement, and unless you guys are going to give the mayor a badge to enforce the rules, but I mean, we're all adults. I think that's what it comes down to. And if somebody gets out of hand, then it unfortunately does become on the mayor to tap down the conversation if it gets out of control. But it's not necessarily fun, but I think that is definitely a tool that's there.
Have you ever seen me in a bad mood?
I don't
I
know that
can
I
get
have.
there. Councilmember Cole.
Yes, I think there is quite a bit of overlap between the principles of conduct and the council rules. And I would be in favor of getting rid of the rules and, I'm sorry, getting rid of the principles of conduct and just incorporating anything that we feel necessary into the council rules. Thanks.
Okay, so Councilmember Stewart, did you just not put your hand down, or are you done? You're muted.
Kathy, do I have my?
No, you're up, but Councilmember Stewart is trying to talk and he's muted.
Sorry about that. I got too many things on my hands here.
Yeah,
I forgot to lower my hand. Sorry.
okay. And then there was Councilmember Brown, and I'll come back to you, Councilmember Hochstetter.
Okay.
Councilmember Brown?
Yep. I'm fine with simplifying.
Simplifying? Yeah,
Yeah, simplify.
thank you.
But also we are adults, but shit happens. I've seen it. So we need rules.
Yeah. All right, Councilmember Hochstetter.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to mention a couple of them that I do think are good to put into our rules. I don't care about 2 because I think we say that in a lot of ways. And I don't think we need 6, the food one. I'm interested in what other people think of number 9, the one to not have side conversations, cell phones, online activity, and texting during a meeting. Some of that, I worry about what the public thinks, but I just want to hear other people's opinions on that. I do like number 10, when it talks about including something positive in our meetings. I've seen how that does a lot of good for keeping people not too serious and always celebrating the public. 11, talks about using formal titles. And if that's not in our other rules, I still think we should probably use it as guidance for new members that come on. The mayor will be respectful of council time by filling the meetings. If that's not in the rules, it's an okay thing to say. I don't think we need 16 at all. I do like 18 to come to meetings.
Jason, can you, sorry, can you scroll down your screen? So you, like, if we can see.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
So 18, go down a little bit further, Jason. It's just good to tell people, number 18 is to come to meetings on time, having read the preparatory material. I think we're just setting up guidance for new people who are coming on, and I think it's just a good thing to know that it's expected. 19, I'm not sure about. That's what you want us to be careful about, criticizing our other partners. I guess I need help on that one, but 21, I think we can eliminate altogether. Under the no surprise rule, I think we do need to say we want to be inclusive in policy making. And number 4, to regularly check your email, because we use it as an efficient tool for city news. The number 7, I think it's important, but I think it needs to be changed around, and it just should be to take individual responsibility for obtaining the information that you've missed when you've had a meeting. So just telling people it's their responsibility to do that. So it's take individual responsibility for obtaining the information and learning about the action and processes that occurred during the meeting that you missed, during the council members' action. I think we need to get rid of 8 altogether. I don't think we need to strive for anonymous votes, unanimous. And I think this might be informational, on the back page, number 2, to utilize the executive department as a resource to assist in media contacts or notify other media contacts. I just think it's a good practice for council members to know that they have someone they can go to if they are going to do that. So those are my suggestions. I digested it and came up with that.
Okay, let's move on. Patrick Reed.
Number 16, please. And that one is, well, absolutely, we want to make sure things are moving forward in a timely fashion, but I caution that opens a door for limiting debate. I don't want there to be an assumption that, if things are being discussed, that it's been hashed out. I think it's good for us to, whether it be in the study sessions or the live meetings, to be able to flesh things out and ask our questions and get answers accordingly, recognizing you don't ask the same thing over and over again, but there may be a variation of that changes as the discussion progresses. So I just want to be careful with that one on how that's worded.
Do you think we needed it all?
Not necessarily, no, because the mayor has authority to preside and limit discussion if it goes down that type of road.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, we have a time limit on study sessions. Do we have a time limit on council meetings?
No, the rules are silent on regular council meetings.
When I first started in 2004, I remember being at meetings after 11 in the evening. And I get up at 4:45. So I like the first part of 16, strive to honor time limits of meetings.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Reed, you had more?
No, I'm sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
All right, Councilmember Hochstetter, you had more?
I put my hand away.
Okay, Councilmember Botetto.
Yeah, on page 43 and 18.4, it's talking about, using your cell phone to access city email. And it says, provide they do not create, edit, or store writings on the device. Are you talking about, I shouldn't be replying to an email that's on my, it's my city email, but I use my cell phone for it?
Now that's perfectly acceptable to do. What we don't want you doing though is, for example, downloading a Word document out of your email, modifying it and saving it somewhere.
Okay, good.
So you can respond to email.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Councilmember Cole, did you have any input on this?
My only input stays as I mentioned before, in that I'd like to see just one document as opposed to 2. So I'd like to see these principles incorporate the ones that are agreeable to the council as a whole, have them incorporated into council rules.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Newman, do you have any input on this?
No, I think it's unnecessary.
Thank you. All right. Hey, Patrick, Councilmember Reed. Are you still going?
There we go. I couldn't get my mute to turn off. There was one, number 9. The one question I had about that, and this would be in order whether it should also move to rules or not, is online activity is actually something I've utilized many times in meetings where discussions are taking place and I look something up, whether it be an RCW or some other type of reference where I've gone in and looked at documents. So I don't know if that even needs to be in there, or if that's because it might be too outdated, or to redact the online activity portion for research purposes or meeting related purposes.
Yeah, I think we could clarify this because I know Councilmember Hochstetter brought up number 9. I would strongly encourage that we need to keep some form of this rule there in place, because side conversations via text message, instant message, Facebook, whatever is going on during a meeting easily violates OPMA. And I'm thankful we don't have that going on now, but I don't want that sneaking into our meetings. And I'm sure Andrea would agree with that. So I think we can rework that, because I don't believe the intent, Mr. Reed, is to say you can't look up an RCW or an SMC. It's more, don't be doing social media and doing things.
Or interpersonal online activity between people. And okay.
Right. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to get a public record request for send me all your text messages that were occurring during a meeting, right?
Fair.
Okay,
And I lowered my hand this time.
all right. I think we've pretty much covered it, Mr. Wilson.
So Mayor, what I can do is I can take the feedback from tonight. I think I got most of it, if not all of it. I will put it into a resolution to amend our rules and bring it back to a study session for review. I would also encourage you, if you have anything else that you are proposing to change in the rules, please contact me ahead of time so we can work through that, and I can keep those out separate to bring back to a study session in February.
Sounds great. Sounds good. Okay, so that takes care of our business portion. City Administrator report.
I would just say to any public that's watching, please follow COVID protocols within the community, mask up indoors, stay safe. And I will tell you, as a city, we are still being affected daily by positive cases among our staff. And as CDC guidelines change, it does affect the number of people that have to quarantine, and can and has impacted service levels. So something that we're continuing to monitor and adjust to almost on a daily basis.
Thank you. Do we have anything on our council meeting agenda? Calendar? Oh, seeing none. Council committees. Anybody have any issues with committees this month? Oh, I think we're good. And we have no executive session, right? All right. I will say we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Great meeting.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.